Right, good morning. Today we're going to have a go doing some fantasy landscapes. Just because it's a really grey and miserable day, you can hear the rain possibly. So I'm going to do something that I think is going to take me into a slightly different, slightly better place. Let's see. I know. Right, so I'm using a B pencil, so it's a little bit darker. I do like my B pencil. So I'm going to put in my background, so just sort of a slightly wobbly line, not too wobbly. Put some cracks and crevices in there as well to break it down, so you can see that this bit here is further forwards than this bit. And then I'm going to put a little drop in here because I'm going to do a bit of a waterfall, because I like waterfalls. There we go. And then I think I'm going to have the landscape really coming down here. So this is much further forwards, this crag, but it's much closer to me and it's going up much higher. And then I'll have that coming down. So now you can see, because it's a bit lower, it's dropping down. And I'll do one more. Like so. Then I've got my water coming here. That's a little bit rounded. I'm going to square that off a little bit, but I'll worry about that in a moment. There we go. Right. So we have the water coming in here. Then I'll put some white foamy bits for the base of the waterfall. And then I want the water coming forwards. And as something comes forwards, it will look bigger the closer it is to you. Further away, smaller. Closer to you, bigger. Right, I don't want it to be too straight. If I was to do it just like that, it would look more like a canal. So I'm going to make it just meander a little bit. As you can see, I'm still keeping that sort of wedge shape to suggest it's going off into the distance. And I'm going to now join these bits up together to give it a sense of continuity. Like so. Throwing a few rocks and boulders and things at the base. You'll notice often I go over my lines. It really doesn't matter, I can use a rubber later on if I need to, or I'll just shade out the lines that I don't want to see. Right, really quite craggy on that side, a little bit softer, but not too soft on this side, because you're not going to have a totally different type of landscape from one side of a river or a stream to the next. I'm coming there. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this one up nice and high as well. So that line I will rub out or shade out or do something with in a minute or two. Sort of a rocky bit there. And this is where the water will be cascading down from. So that's the basic layout of my picture. And these are all the sort of natural elements, and then because it's a fantasy landscape, I want to include something where there's a man-made feature as well. Right, let's have a look at the water now. Water, we'll start on the rivery part. If you're doing water, you need to make sure you're putting in horizontal lines. As soon as you start doing vertical lines or even diagonal lines, it suggests it's going in a different direction. You can put other lines in like so where it's showing it, the flow of the water, but for this point in time, just keep it really simple and have the flow. And I'm pressing down a little bit darker at the back to really make that white stand out, to give it a greater contrast. There we go. I'm just putting that in like so. So it's not too neat. You can see I'm leaving kind of squiggly lines, but I'm not doing it at angles either. You can't just scribble it in, because if you do, you'll lose the flow of the water. So everything is roughly horizontal. And then, because this water's cascading down off the waterfall, that's going to come down vertically. And again, I'm just going to get a bit more shading to emphasize the white foamy bits at the bottom. There we go. Now a bit of shading work. Just using the pencil, bring bits in. I'm going to decide where my light's coming from. I'm going to have light coming in from this side today. So there's my little arrow to remind myself. So everything on this side is going to be catching the light. Everything on the back of that will be that little bit darker. So all of these rocks are going to be slightly darker on this side because the light's coming in and it's going to be putting these in the shade. So we're going to have lots of shade and shadow. And I'm doing this really, really quickly just to give you an idea of what we can do. And I'm putting in lots of these sort of rock lines where you get the actual strata of the rock. And if we've got rocks like this, you will have quite a few nice lumps of rock that have fallen off that we can place at the base. It just gives it more texture. Texture makes a picture like this. When you're just working in black and white, you've got to try and think what's going to be creating all the shapes, all the lines and all the different tones. I've started doing it there without thinking about it. We're going to put some grasses in as well, a bit of vegetation. So if my grass here is this big, there it's going to be a little bit smaller and smaller as we go back. Now obviously grasses are all different sizes, but if you try and make it much smaller as you go into the distance, it'll just give that sense of perspective and a sense of scale. I'm going to put a tree in over this side in a minute or two. For the types of vegetation, I'm really rushing this with my shading, but just to give you an idea of what I'm doing. So this is my quick fantasy picture. Your landscape might be totally different. This is just to give you an idea. Now I'm going to make that a fair bit darker here because I need to have some contrast against the water. And if you need to go over things a few times, absolutely fine. Right. Yeah, I'll put the tree in now. So I've done tree lessons with you before, most of you anyway. So make sure it's actually growing out of the ground, so it's slightly thicker at the base, not too thick, but a little bit thicker. We don't want it to be too straight, especially when it's growing somewhere so rocky and wild. I'm doing it to actually frame my picture. This is to do with the composition. When I'm doing the picture, I want you to be looking where I want you to go. I don't want your eyes to be drifting off to the sides. So I'm channeling everything in to where I want your eyesight to be taking you. I want this branch to be coming not out flat on the side, but slightly further forward. So to show that, and just put this little kind of curve into the branch. And remember, when we do our branches, everything tapers. It's always getting thinner and thinner as you go towards the edges. The further out you go, the thinner it becomes. Do some shading and things on that. And I'm going to add some rough foliage now. It's just kind of a cloud shape almost. Not all in one big piece, in several clusters. And just build it up and then we can put the individual leaves on later. Just to give it a bit more shape. And then we'll texture the branch as well and the trunk. My light's coming in from this side, so this will be the darker side. I'm not using a rubber to rub any lines out, I'm just going to shade things in. There we go. So this side will be the darker side. Some grasses at the bottom so it looks like it's really bedded in nice and well. And some mosses and things on the base. That will do that. And then, as well as doing the actual shading part, we can also add a little bit of texture to the trunk as well. So I'm just going to put in a few sorts of lines. Don't make them too neat. These are looking a little bit too regular, so I'm going to roughen them up a bit more. Get that curve on there. They're looking a bit too straight. If you've got a rounded object, you've got to keep those curved lines in. There we go. And then for my foliage, I'm just going to shade it up. If you do want to do this in colour later on, don't do such heavy shading. In fact, don't do shading at all. Save the shading for the actual pencil crayons. Because otherwise you've got this sort of slightly grey metallic tint that always comes through and it never looks as good. Because with pencil, it isn't actually grey, a flat grey, it's a slightly metallic grey, it's got a sheen to it. So lighter as I'm going up, darker at the bottom. I'll make sure we get plenty of contrast between the two, and that will do there. That's my tree, so that's helping me channel into here. And the other thing that helps is as you come further forwards, press down that little bit harder because it's closer to you and you can see it better. You've got better focus on it. So the lines are going to be sharper, the shades and the shadows will be sharper, they'll have greater contrast. I mean, there will be times when that's not the case, but generally that's how things work. Right, as I say, I'm really rushing this, trying to put features in just to give you an idea. Right, how's that looking? Helps when it's in the shade a bit more, isn't it? Right, I'm going to put in the man-made feature. Now, as I say, this is a fancy landscape, and I've done a couple of these now. I'm going to put in a man-made feature, so it's going to be far more regular lines. Things nice, perpendicular. You can probably tell I'm making this up as I go along. I've got no idea really what I'm doing. Some sort of a towery thing. Now we've got this side hitting the light, so this side will need to be that little bit darker. So I'm just bringing that round to this circular sort of tower. Yeah, something like that, and just a little dome or something on the top. And I'll have some trees and things. Don't need to do too much, just. I'll have some trees down here as well. And again, I'm going back to that sort of cloud shape. Just build it up. I don't need to see too much. Might be a little bit of a trunk that I can see. It'll be a bit darker. And the rest of it, it's just about creating that shading. So from dark to light, building up those textures. Like so. That's all it needs. It's in the distance. You can't really see it. Your brain is filling in the gaps, really. need some more detail out in the front, but I can carry on adding. And one final thing to add to your picture, I would like, if possible, imagine it's an adventure story. Imagine you, or a character, doesn't have to be you, is going on this adventure. Let's see that person in here. So I'm just going to really quickly, now had I thought about this a little bit more, I could have made a wider river and put the person on a boat. I've done another example that I did on a video that didn't work, which is actually very similar to this picture. And all I did is I just drew in the person by the side of the river, and I think I'll do the same again. So I'm going to just bring in a bit more land here, so my person's actually not just stood in the stream or in the river. And then looking towards whatever that building is, whatever that place is in the distance. Head, body, waist, legs. And if we remember, legs make up pretty much half of the body. And this hand is going to be holding a staff because I did it on the other picture and I liked it. Some more grass and more features in here. And then I'm just going to start filling this in. Don't need to worry about too much detail because it's near silhouette. It's just shades of grey essentially at this point. Let's put a hood on the back. A few creases in the clothes. You can see how rushed or quick that you can do the legs. You don't need too much detail. You won't see too much. It's, as I say, mostly silhouette. The hair in, and just because I like doing it, I'm going to do it as a ponytail. And square off the hand, because if you're holding something, your hand looks fairly squarish like that. It's just straight up and across. And then some sort of a staff. Basically, this picture is very similar to the one I did as the example the other day, but that's fine. Some sort of magical stone thing on the top. Could actually extend the waterfall even further if I wanted to actually see the flat of the water going in, like so. So this is a tower that's sort of the main feature on this waterfall. What I would like to do after we've had a go at doing this is to turn this from a picture into a possibly a shadow box, some sort of 3D piece of art. See what we can come up with. All right, this needs a bit more shading. Right, so I'll leave that there. That's that picture. The one I did yesterday, as I say, very, very similar. I did it again with the waterfall, crumbling old dome. Still liking that tree to kind of create that archway. I'm sure most of you have done trees with me. If you haven't, I'll do a lesson on trees. I've done another one quite a long time ago. I'll lift that up because it's not very clear. Again, archways, looking into the waterfall in the distance. Same idea, the river's getting wider, vertical down, horizontal across, getting those craggy bits in for the rocks. I just like drawing rocks. If you want to add some colour, we can do it with colour. You can add that later. There you go. That's it. Have a go at making a fantasy landscape. Enjoy.